Well, first of all, I'm excited to chat with you. I don't want to diminish anything that you have done on the previous 5 seasons of The Handmaid's Tale, but I do feel personally that like Luke really got to have some hero moments finally at the end of season 6, the final season.
Yeah.
Start with that, with how you feel about that, if you feel like he finally showed what he could do and how that felt to you as an actor.
Yeah, I was really glad. I think there can be a temptation to just keep characters somewhat the same as they go through a series. And there's good reason for that because it's like, well, if it's working, then, fix it. But I thought the writers were really brave to give Luke that step forward. And it seemed to me that, his big block was taking action in a physical, practical, putting your life on the line sense. He was always, I guess, a bit more of a bureaucratic, go to the embassy type of dude. And so I was really excited to see him like take matters into his own hands and take all the big risks.
I don't even just mean like the physical in 608, like storming the stage and being physical and violent in that manner. I also mean in the finale when we see how handy he is. Like he can help get the electrical back on, like all of these
Yeah.
things that maybe we were overlooking or just not thinking about because there were other things at hand. Were these attributes of his that you felt like you knew all along, that you knew he had this in him and you were just like, as you said, like kind of waiting to see how they would play out? Or was that even maybe a surprise to you about like just how good at this he was going to be?
Well, in his before life, he was a city planner. And so he had some kind of connection to that sort of
Sure, but to me,
thing.
I always hear city planner and I always think maybe a little hands off on the like tech stuff. And
Well,
I'm like,
exactly that.
right.
Exactly that. And I think, necessity being the mother of invention, he's had to get practical and he's got a strong mind and a strong will. And so like learning and using skills which can be like transferred to the more practical. I think, I don't go in with a very fixed idea of where a character is going. I kind of let them be led by the writers and the writers revealed to me that gosh, he can do these kind of things. And so I was pretty happy about that.
What was the conversation, if there was one, around you saying to them, please don't let him die? Was that ever part of this? Or did you not, maybe not care if he lived or died? Maybe you felt like dying a hero's death is just as great a moment.
I pitched him dying. I pitched. I thought I would. I did like. I had this idea of Luke that he could just kind of be like so. He'd just go into Gilead like on a fool's mission and just get shot. Because in a way, a lot of times over the last few series, people would say, "Well, Luke, why don't you go and get your kid back? And why don't you?" And I always think, in the real world, people are so much at the mercy of governments and wars and these big things. And when normal humans get put in the mix of that, they often end up dead. And I think there is something that could have been both beautiful and poetic and tragic, of course, about him going, well, okay, I am going to do that thing then. I am going to do that thing. I'm going to just going to go. And then you just end up dead. Anyway, so I like that version, but I like the version we got probably smarter.
I mean, it's also interesting because in the Testaments, if people know the book, there is a passage or a line about like both daughters are reunited with their fathers. And like to hear you say you pitched Luke dying, knowing Nick also died, I'm like, that would make the whole thing so much more tragic, not just for the Handmaid's Tale, but for what comes after. Which I mean, maybe you're not worried about because like that's not your show, but like that just struck me right now. So
Right, right. No, I wasn't worried about them. They've got to figure out their own issues.
that's fair. Talking about, I call it kind of a sense of victory, certainly for the show overall, certainly for Mayday, June, Luke as well. But there is still such a sadness to it because Hannah's not with them. And there is still so much like, yes, they're moving her closer, but who knows what that means in terms of time it may take to get to her. And then also, P.S., she may not remember them. So I'm curious in those scenes that you're playing where Luke is having this like hyped up moment, like I'm so excited we were able to do this. I'm so excited I'm going to get the electricity back on. How did you walk the line, or how did you want to walk the line of like I need to have a little bit of sadness here, or a little bit of like this is just this is like the battle but not the war type of vibe?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, it's interesting to hear you speak about it because I think playing it, I never felt, oh, I'm so excited that I got the electricity back on. I felt like,
That's fair. I know we're
yeah.
excited for you.
I was kind of like more like driven. There is this next step which can get us one step closer to that, but there is no satisfaction, as it were.
Even also, I want to look at that scene with you and Lizzie where you're talking about like what is here with us, like what is left, the love and the like, we don't know each other like we did before, but there's still after. I kind of want to break it down just in terms of how you worked on that together to find that level of emotion in, again, kind of similar to what I just asked. Like there's hope, there's sadness, there's like a lot of things going on. And what that after even, like, could you imagine what that after could even be?
Well, I mean, all hail to Wendy, our editor, because a lot of times when Lizzie and I have scenes together, we do a number of versions. And sometimes they're contradictory and sometimes they edit together contradictory versions. And I think Wendy did a really great job of that. But I think to me, the ambiguity of their relation, I was always comfortable with the ambiguity of their relationship, that ultimately these two people bonded. They're bonded through trauma and bonded through flesh, and they're bonded through love and commitment and a shared goal. They have so many strands which underpin why they're going to be connected for the rest of their days, that how that manifests, does it look like a relationship where they're having sex twice a week? Does it look like a relationship where they're going to the supermarket and deciding free range and not free? Like maybe in certain, but that's not the important part
But
of it.
also that would imagine a future that is much closer to what we are living now than what they
Correct.
were living in Gilead slash
Yes.
land slash all the places they've been.
Yeah, absolutely. I think what I mean is people often, I feel like, want to pigeonhole their relationship into like, oh, are they together or not together? And to me, they're like, well, they're together. That's it. How does their togetherness manifest? It may manifest they don't see each other for 6 months, but they are together in most of the profound ways.
Do you feel though, with her kind of going off, she leaving again, that he has more confidence now because they've taken Gilead part of this regime down, or is that like the tinge of fear around what may happen still the same because it is still a bigger world?
The threat is always there, like the threat of the worst case scenario, which is something bad happening to Hannah, and it is there, and there's a ticking clock to it. That being said, there is more. He has more hope than he's maybe ever had, more tangible, realizable hope, and also a new tool, a new methodology, a new way.
Did you guys talk at all about, that Hannah of it, of like they're talking about her coming closer and what that might mean for, as you were saying before, like Luke's next step? Like if one step is, okay, we stormed the stage, and one step is they killed all the commanders, and one step is they got the electricity back on. Like how many steps before Hannah ends? Well, actually, let's start there. How many steps before Hannah?
I think a large part of Luke's thinking is that Gilead must fall for Hannah to be free. And so that, it's just how many steps until the fall of Gilead, as opposed to one which is a little bit more like how many steps before we can smuggle her out, kind of thing.
Because the second part of that question is, I asked you this, you're not gonna remember, it's fine. I barely remember, but I asked you in season 1, back before June and Luke were reunited, like if they were reunited, would they recognize each other? And I wonder how you feel, if you've thought about this about Hannah. Like she's not the little girl that they left. She's been brought up by this regime that maybe she's buying into. I'm assuming she doesn't remember them. Did you feel like you needed to think about that as an actor, as like, because Luke has this hope, what do I imagine he wants out of that reunion? What do I think that reunion would be?
Yeah, it's a really profound question, because I guess there are a couple of elements to it. One is that I think at 6, 7, 8 years old, that Hannah was, I think she was 7. There's still quite a lot of memories. A lot of people have lots of memories from when they were 7. So I think she would remember us, and especially me, very charismatic. Um, on the other hand, your love for your child, like what do you want from them? I don't think it should be predominantly about what they think about you and what their relationship with you is. And especially at the age she is now, 15, 16, 17, going into womanhood, it's more about like, how can she live her most flourished life? And life will not be under the thumb of Gilead. And so, yes, on one hand, one can fantasize about, oh, is this reunion going to look like, oh, Daddy, thank you, God, for saving me? Probably not, but that is also not the goal. I don't think.
Was it ever on the table to film any sort of like fantasy sequence, dream sequence? There's so many
Yeah, a fantasy sequence, you mean like just me, Nick, and June?
of the reunion, because
Oh, the reunion, yeah.
think to me how many, like, there's so many flashbacks to what it was, and then there's the beautiful scene at the end where we finally see June is telling the story for her daughter, and we see like a younger Hannah kind of in her head in the room. I wonder if that was ever on the table for you.
No, I would have loved it. It would have been very cathartic if it even just being on the table would have made me feel a little bit better, but it was never placed.
I do want to really quickly, for housekeeping reasons, all three of these shows that you were working on this season, Handmaids, No Good Deed, Presumed Innocent, what order did you film in? Because I am also curious about like going from character to character, if that affected any of the choices that you then made for who your characters had to be.
Yeah, I also shot Loot at the same time. And I remember that in particular because I was shooting Loot and Presumed Innocent at the same time.
I hear you say that. Okay.
So the order was I was shooting Loot and Presumed Innocent at the same time, and very often, like like a few times, I would shoot Presumed Innocent in the morning. They take me in a bus over to the other studio and shoot Loot, and so it was like this intense drama playing this kind of snooty American DA, and then going over to play this like this pompous English architect, I guess you could say. Anyway, so it was quite fun doing that. Anyway, so we did that. Then I did No Good Deed. And then I did the final season of Handmaids.
Okay. The reason I'm asking is, and because I didn't expect you to say that Loot was right on top of it, I was going to say that you rarely get to do comedy except for Loot. And so, I mean, No Good Deed is obviously comedy, just dark. Right. So, I mean, hearing you say like the way that you're going back and forth, did you make any choices for any of these characters based on where you just came from and where you were going, in the sense of like maybe you didn't want to infuse anything with too much tongue-in-cheek or humor?
No, you know what? I think it may be somewhat analogous to what I was saying about the kid, is that like my like allegiance or what I'm supposed to do, my job is not about my career and does that character match this character or anything. I'm always like, how do I serve this script? And I have this filmmaker in front of me, whether it's Liz Feldman or anyone from Handmaids to Presumed Innocent, and it's like I have to serve this script. And so even if it means, it's funny because I did a show recently, and I had someone say to me, oh, you should do like another interesting voice like you did for Presumed Innocent. And I was like, yeah, that maybe if I was like serving myself and be like, oh, what's the weird voice I can do, but this part doesn't require that. So anyway, so I try as much as I can just to be of service to the piece and not be interrelational, I think.
Your American accent, you've made the choice to do it differently on different shows, which I find really interesting. Like, I think a lot of actors have one American accent. What inspires the difference per show? Is it regional? I mean, I know you had a specific influence for Presumed Innocent, but like, even just to back up before that influence, what made you say, I want to do something different at all?
But the funny thing is I was almost taken by surprise of how much of a stir that accent caused, because it's just like, I just read it in the script and thought, like, so for example, for No Good Deed, it said he mentions a couple of times that he was brought up in New York.
Yes.
And I knew who had been cast as his mom, and I knew who he had married. And so when I kind of did his history, and I started writing, I'm like, okay, well, he probably went to a historically black university, and so maybe lots of his friendship group of black. So he probably has a black sounding, African American sounding, East Coast related accent, but might have been softened because he has to fit into certain white spaces. And so then I go, what is that? And then I go find people who I think sound like that. And so that's how every single dialect is done. It's just like, what do the clues tell me? I feel like I'm like trying to find it. And in Presumed Innocent, he was kind of like, someone makes a comment in one of the scenes about how his voice is grating or how he's annoying. I just went, oh, okay, great. Let me just go and find out what that is. That's me typing, if you didn't know. It's not me being a little gerbil.
Your research. Yeah. But it's also interesting because, the the way people reacted to Nico and presumed innocent in the show, I think does tell you a lot about him. But I think also, and you've said this, that like he doesn't like other people. So how, I mean, maybe this is just on the script, but I am in the script, but I am curious how, balancing the disdain that he has for other people with maybe absorbing the annoyance that they have for him, but also you're in court, so you have to be sort of professional. Like, at what point do you say, I need to not show all of his cards or not show just how he hates everybody? You know what I mean? Like, just balancing those pieces of him when especially when he's just in court and he like can't really say anything.
Like I was kind of taught that like drama is about conflict, and you can have the external conflicts and you can have the internal conflicts. And so one of the things that I'm like attuned to and looking out for is what are the ways that a person's disposition are inherently in conflict with the things that he's meeting in his life. And so, for example, you're a misanthrope, you don't like people, you think you're better than everybody else, but you have to play this game and be very nice and be liked by people and be voted in by people. And so you've got inherent conflict, the internal conflict meeting the real world. And so all the places, and so I think it's interesting watching someone vacillate between those two, because and sometimes you fail and let out your inner self, and the other time, so
it's interesting because watching you play that role and this was nothing that the show did. This was me just being like, who would Nico be in Gilead? Like, I was
he definitely gives like commander energy, doesn't he?
Like, he feels like he would fit in a way that we don't want, but also,
funny. That's very funny. No.
So, okay, I do want to also look at No Good Deed a little bit because it's also a very interesting relationship. Like, as you were talking about June and Luke and how like they're together, but maybe they don't see each other for a while. I feel like this relationship is really interesting, especially at the end, because like obviously they're together, they're very much together, but they have this other outside force that is, what's the nice way of saying it? Just breathing down their neck in his mother. Like, she's just complicating things. And then certainly at the end, now he's complicating things with his secret. I guess I want to start with that ending a little bit and just like dissect how much you feel like that what he did would change their relationship.
It's so funny you ask, because there's a part of me which, as the character, I just think, because a lot of our work anyway is kind of like from like, I just see things from my character's perspective, not so much, I hate OT looking at this character. Anyway, but so it's so funny you asking that question, because I immediately kind of went back to his mindset, which was like, don't think about that. I'm sure we're okay. Like there's this avoidant tendency in him, which is just like, this is how he, lies about writing his book. It's like, if you're afraid to look at it too closely, you can just put it out of your mind. And so I don't think I haven't, until you asked that question, ever thought, how would it work out for them? Because he's not thinking well.
There's also such an interesting aspect, I think, to the character, like his mortality looming over him at a certain point. Like, at a certain point, you can't avoid everything. You can't avoid all of these things. And he has complicated it more by what he does.
Yeah.
So I guess, I don't even know how I really want to phrase this, but I guess my question is really how you as an actor were affected by that. By like, as you're saying, he's avoiding everything, how that affected you in playing him. And then also when you bring in that mortality aspect, if that changed anything for you in terms of how you felt about him and how you wanted him to react in certain situations.
What's funny is actually sarcoidosis is something that I've got a very close family member who has sarcoidosis, which is what he's diagnosed with. And also I have a couple of instances very close to me of people postponing dealing with medical issues to their huge detriment. So I guess that for me, there was just lots to draw on personally with that kind of like whole situation. So I don't know if that answers the question, but yeah, that's what came to my mind.
Yeah, that's fair. When you were building the relationship between Dennis and Carla, and then, mixing his mother into the mix, how much work did you feel like you had to do for yourself in terms of like, why does he let his mother insert as much? Like, is that all on the page, or is there a little backstory you need to work out?
Oh no, well, I mean, I always do quite a lot of backstory to my characters anyway, but that part was pretty easy. I come from a very large family. My family are very influential to me. They're and not just my mom is very influential, my dad, but also people like my big sister, my big brother. They have a lot of say in, and so I mean, I wouldn't put it like say, but they just have a lot of influence. I come from the culture I come from growing up is just very deferential and
Mm.
also very connected to the wider family. So all of that stuff was actually much more easy for me, and it takes some assimilation for me to understand. Okay, in the US and
Uh,
the UK, people are a lot more insulated and say, "Hey, mom, you're over there, thank you." For some people that is, and so I have to do a translation the other way around. This way, it was very, very intuitive to me.
I hear that. I hear what you're saying. I just felt like even for the families here who are very close and who do maybe live together or live nearby, like the influence that he allowed her to have, I felt was still above, which obviously is the point because it's a comedy and like we're trying to create that conflict. I don't know. I
It's
think.
so funny. Like to me, I was like, it's interesting that his wife is so opposed to the things that his mom
Oh,
is.
did you guys talk a lot about that on set though? About like,
We joked about it because,
okay,
yeah, we joked a lot about it. But it's so funny because like on set, we had like a semi, what would you call it? Like method. There was a little bit of that vibe, Mom was always like, making snide remarks, and I was always caught in the middle, but in a fun way, like not in a kind of like harsh
all
way.
right.
But anyway, yeah. But we would talk about it, and we did have a difference of intuition in some of those cultural aspects, But it was fun to chat about and to play out for sure.
I mean, obviously, the baby is a big part of that season as well. I mean, realistically speaking, a baby changes anybody's relationship, but especially with this, with the new house, with the secret, etc. Like, imagine a season two for a second. I kind of left season one thinking, oh, they're going to be a central couple if they get a season two because they're now the ones with this big secret. They're now the ones who built this house on like terrible energy.
Right,
Um,
right.
how do you feel like the baby specifically would change their dynamic?
My goodness, Josh, I have to bring myself back to it.
I know.
I,
I always feel bad when I do these Emmy ones because I'm like, you did this so long ago.
yeah, I mean it's fun because like you say, like having a child is so transformative. I guess it and also very often transformative in ways which are unpredictable. You could think, oh, I'm going to be this type of mother, I'm going to be this type of father, and then a live conscious being who's dependent on you comes, and you're like, oh, this is who I am when such a thing happens. But I'd like to hope that it would bring them closer. But you know what? No sleep and stress does to a relationship. Shut up. So I think there would have been reason for lots of comedy in the second season.
Yeah. Because you mentioned that the way that you went from show to show and like some of, presumed innocent overlaps with loot, did that working environment change anything for you? Like, have you now when you step back and you're like, these big shows are behind me, the next thing I do, maybe I want to do one at a time, a little bit more space between, like, how did this season overall affect, I guess, as simply put, what you want to do next?
I love acting. I love the industry. I'm just into it. And so to bring it on. I mean, funnily enough, I also did cameos in two indie movies during that time as well. Of very different characters, one of them playing Michel Martelly, the ex-president of Haiti, who was
I didn't realize that
insane.
was at the same time. See, that's what I mean. Like, I don't get like, I don't see call sheets. I don't know when.
Right, right.
So in my head, I was like, I know that's coming out soon. I just didn't know when you would had filmed it. So that to hear you say that, that is also crazy. Like that's a lot all on top of each other.
Oh yeah, and then another indie movie which has just come out in Cannes, which I was shooting during Handmaid. Like it was like on the spare weekend, I went off and shot. And so, but I just love it. I love being busy. I also write, so
Yeah.
I'm, like just before we got on, I was pitching a project this morning. Like I love it. So I don't know. I'm very happy to be busy. When people ask me, is it hard being an actor? I'm like, no, it's hard not acting. That's what's hard.
Yeah.
Like acting is not the hard part.
You just said you were pitching. Is it season two of Max?
Oh wow, I would love to be doing a season 2 of Max. If anybody hasn't checked it out on Hulu, Maxxx. But it's actually a new project. Over the Christmas, I just had a flash of inspiration. My brother Luti, who is my producing partner, I called him up and I was like, "Listen, I know you're coming up to Virginia for Christmas, but I want to shoot a short." And he was like, "During Christmas?" We don't have any actors. And I was like, your daughter's also a good actor, right? We can use her and so we begged, borrowed, and stole, and we shot this short that turned out really well. And now we're off pitching that.